Okay. Um, Welcome to this assignment. So today we are going to be reading about the Black Death. You are going to be reading several primary sources written um, from around the world, really, about how this plague affected communities, civilizations, families, etc. It's a pretty interesting time to have this assignment, considering we are in the middle of our own plague, albeit much on a much different scale. Um, Black Plague, it's estimated 45 to 65% of the world, or at least in certain cities, died from this virus. And we aren't seeing nearly that casualty rate, but we definitely have some similarities. So, before we get going with the actual assignment, and you will be reading these sources and answering questions, I just wanted to read a little intro. The devastation wrought by the plague in Afro-Eurasia. So whenever it says that in the textbook, guys, that means Africa, Europe, Asia, right? And when it says Africa, it usually means Northern Africa, because at the time that's mostly where we've been focusing our attention on these civilizations, like in Egypt. Anyway, the devastation wrought by the plague in Afro-Eurasia and the upheaval that followed were unprecedented and far-reaching in their impact. Families were broken as parents, spouses, and children deserted one another for fear of contagion. Religious responses varied from hopelessness to ecstatic devotion. The plague affected the economy as well as causing skyrocketing prices, diminished availability of goods and labor, an unmet demand for certain products and services. Dramatic population losses demonstrated its demographic impact. Beginning in the southwestern China in the 1320s, the pestilence, or Great Mortality as it became known in Europe, wiped out between 25 and 65% of populations it afflicted. The plague traveled along trade routes in inner Eurasia, taking advantage of the connectivity that had bound the Afro-Eurasian world together and facilitated the movement of people, goods, and ideas. The plague also took advantage of an already weakened population that had experienced a little ice age and a resulting famine. This is also due to climate change in the early years of the 14th century. Modern scholars have scrutinized sources that determine answers to such questions as what the precise death tolls were, why the plague's effect were so much more devastating in some regions than others, and what kind of disease it was. Septemic, blood-borne and spread by fleas or rats or other animals. Pneumonic, airborne, spread by coughing and the accompanying spewing of blood that so many of the sources report, or a combination of the two. No less fascinating, however, are the attempts by writers of the 14th and early 15th century to understand the plague's causes and immediate effects. The sources here offer a mix of perspectives. Some come from authors who experienced the plague firsthand, and others from authors who lived in the plague's aftermath and considered its causes and effects. There are regional accounts from two different sources: the Islamic world, particularly Syria and Egypt, and Europe. Um, anyway, I am at this point going to let you get going on this assignment. So you're going to be using your textbook, follow the instructions, and have fun with this assignment. It's hard to say have fun considering it's talking about such a horrible subject, death and families being torn apart and civilizations collapsing. But it's interesting to see and compare our modern pandemic and plague to the Black Death of the 13 and 1400s.